Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if this is your first time seeing one of my videos. Today, as you would have noticed by looking at the title as well as the thumbnail, we're going to be taking a look at some unseen products in Mortal Kombat's history. So you might be assuming that I'm just going to be talking about games, maybe some scrap DLC. Today, we're not really going to be looking at that side of it. We're mainly going to be looking at fully fledged games that either never really finished development. We're also going to be taking a look at shows like the third season of Mortal Kombat Legacy that just never came out, some ports of games that just never really saw the light of day. So if that sounds interesting to you, consider sticking around and consider subscribing, because I want to make more Mortal Kombat videos like this. And if you like the video, it lets me know that you want to see that from me. So I really appreciate you being here. Let's look at our first unreleased product for Mortal Kombat. The first one we're going to be taking a look at here is from Mortal Kombat vs DC Universe. So yes, this is a game that not many people really care about. A lot of people would say it's their least favorite Mortal Kombat game. Now for me personally, I actually don't mind this game. It's by no means a great game, but overall, I feel like this game is pretty decent if you compare it to sort of older games, especially from the late 90s. But obviously, I digress. Point is, we're going to be actually looking at the DLC for this game, because you're probably thinking if you've played the game, it had no DLC, and you'd be correct, but there was actually plans for DLC for this game, which I'm sure some of you might not be aware of. So in the story mode, we can see Quan Chi, and there's a full render for him that should be up on your screen right now. So he was meant to be the first DLC character. You'll notice that the design is basically exactly what he had in MK9. So we can assume that they made this design here and they really liked it, so they wanted to use it in the next game. Now the second character was Harley Quinn. Now the design you see on your screen right now is just from Injustice 1. Of course, she didn't end up appearing, and I feel like the design in Injustice 1 maybe could have been inspired by what they had in mind for this one. Now, there were a couple other characters, and these two I'm not 100% sure on, but Kung Lao as well as Dark Khan, the final boss, were also planned as DLC, but these just never came to be, unfortunately. So you might be wondering why they never came out, and unfortunately it is because Midway, the company that actually owned the Mortal Kombat license, filed for bankruptcy just shortly after, I believe 3 months after the release of this game. This of course meant they couldn't continue working on any of their franchises, and a lot of them unfortunately just sort of ceased to exist because no one really wanted to buy them. But Mortal Kombat being a really big license, it was fortunately bought out by Warner Brothers, but that is why unfortunately they couldn't really get these characters out. And unfortunately too, it seems as if that these characters were basically nearly completed, but just were never able to come out because of the sort of situations that they couldn't control, which of course is very unfair and it sucks. But hopefully you guys didn't know that fact. I found that pretty interesting learning that one. So the next topic I want to look at that I'm sure a lot of you, if you were in my situation, would be aware of, but I'm sure a lot of you actually don't know this as well. So Mortal Kombat X came out in 2015 on the Xbox One and PS4. But did you know there actually were originally plans for the game to come out on the 360 and the PS3, however it was unfortunately cancelled. So this one sucked for me because I used to play MK9 a lot with my sister, and we were waiting for this game to come out, and we were broke, we were kids, so we only had a 360, which we had got for free, and we started playing MK9 just basically after MKX was announced. So we were excited, we were going to try and get this game after we tried MK9, and we were waiting for this release, and it just sort of never happened, which was a big disappointment. And yeah, it's pretty crazy that this game was initially meant to be releasing on the previous consoles, and at the time the next gen, or the current gen consoles you could say. But unfortunately, this would be cancelled. I assume it's really because of the fact that MKX doesn't really look like a game that could work on these consoles. There were too many downgrades that they had to make in terms of the graphics and just how the game would feel and work overall, which ultimately is why it never came to be. But let me know in the comments, do you think that they could have sort of figured out a way to do this? Because we know by this comment on screen here that they did try to make it work, and it was delayed a couple times as well just because of how difficult it actually was to implement. It definitely sucks that this wasn't able to be implemented, but at the end of the day, I think we can all sort of understand why. They wanted the game to work well, they wanted it to function as best as possible, and the older gen consoles just couldn't handle it, unfortunately. Now let's look at one that I personally didn't know that much about. So Legacy, or Mortal Kombat Legacy I should sort of be naming it, is a show that ran 2 seasons and they weren't received all that well, but it was a pretty short show and it looked at the Mortal Kombat characters, gave some backstory, it retold the backstory of some characters, but overall the series was received pretty well, in the first season at least. Second season wasn't received quite so well, but overall it was seen as one of sort of the better non-game products to come out of the series at the time. But there was actually a 3rd season that was shot, it was filmed, everything, but just never came out. So you might be wondering what it was actually about. So this season was apparently meant to take a look at the next generation of fighters, sort of similar to MKX, how it introduced a bunch of new characters that were the children of some of our old favorite characters. Cassie Cage was meant to have a large role in this. Now I'm not sure who was actually playing that role, but we do know that a lot of actors came back from the previous seasons, some new ones as well. It was really just focused on that next generation that MKX focused on, and it was what Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, or it would have been MK5, was meant to be looking at before John Tobias left, is that he had a plan to make a basically new game of basically new characters. You could see this in characters like Frost, who, yes, she's not Sub-Zero's daughter, but it's like the next generation of characters with similar personalities and abilities. That was sort of his idea. Now in this, I can't say for sure because we don't really have a story that we can go off. All we really know is that it was focused on the next generation. And I think that would have been pretty interesting to see new actors taking on new roles and actually just how the story would play out. Would it be similar to MKX or completely different? Unfortunately, we may never know, but I feel like this was just a pretty interesting thing to mention here. So next, I wanted to take a look at something I'm sure a lot of you are aware of and something that I personally really want, but it just unfortunately never came out, and that is a remaster of the original 3 Mortal Kombat games from the arcades. So this would likely be coming to current gen consoles and of course would need a reworking of the actual controls and how it works, because the original games are pretty clunky, especially if you're playing on an arcade machine or just an old console. It can be pretty difficult to play the games, so it definitely would need some reworking, and that's what they were going to do, but unfortunately it was cancelled. So we don't really know what it was going to be looking like, at least as far as I know. So the screenshots you're seeing right now, these aren't like official. I tried to find sort of concepts that have been made that I feel like it would probably closely resemble at least. But as we know, the creator of Mortal Kombat, Ed Boon, really wanted to make these and get them out, but unfortunately it just couldn't happen. It is speculated that ultimately they couldn't get these out because Warner Brothers didn't want the sales of this to have any sort of damage on the sales of the, at the time, current game MK11, which makes sense with Warner Bros, obviously. So they didn't want this to affect the sales of their most recent game, which sure makes sense, but it kind of sucks because I think we all would love to see this in some form. Even if they didn't remaster them, I'd love to play the old games on current consoles. It just would be a bit more efficient, a bit better for everyone, I feel. It sucks that they cancelled it because I feel like it would just be really awesome to see these sprites in much better quality. They could even add on to like the rosters and stuff. It would have been a really cool thing for them to do, but unfortunately for now, it remains cancelled. But hopefully in the future they pick it back up again and can actually release it as a full project. So this isn't technically one, but I wanted to mention it because it can technically be seen as an unseen product, but I'm sure some of you know about it and it is sort of linked to the previous one, so I did just quickly want to mention it. But the original trilogy of games, not remastered, just the original trilogy, were available on the PS3 and Xbox 360. And they actually are still available on the Xbox 360, but this is just a pretty inconvenient way to play it because most of you watching this, I assume, have a console and play Mortal Kombat. You probably don't use your Xbox 360 or PS3 much, if you even have one at all. So this was just inconvenient, but the PS3 version was delisted, meaning you have no way to play it. So I thought that this would be something interesting to mention because there isn't really a way to play these games on consoles anymore. That's definitely an issue I want to cover in a future video, how you can basically play none of the older Mortal Kombat games anywhere, at least legally anymore. So that definitely sucks, but I thought I'd mention that here. So let's get on to the final one of this video. I'm sure plenty of you fellow huge Mortal Kombat fans are aware of this one, but I thought it would be pretty interesting to share for those of you who might not be aware. So in 2006, I believe it was, it could have been another year, I'll have to double check, they released Shaolin Monks, which was a spin-off. So before this game came out, the only spin-offs they'd done were Mythology Sub-Zero and Special Forces, which neither of them were particularly received too well, but they wanted to try again in a different sort of formula, and this one actually worked really, really well. People really liked this game, so they wanted to do it again, but with Scorpion and Sub-Zero, them of course being the two most popular characters in Mortal Kombat, arguably two of the most important characters, not just in fighting games, but just gaming in general. But this never came out, unfortunately. Now we can actually see some concepts for this game, hopefully I've put them up on your screen here, of maps and areas that we'd actually be fighting in, but this never came to be. Unfortunately, there isn't too much information as to why. I assume it's a similar reason as the remasters from the last fact, that it would affect sales. Maybe they were worried it wouldn't sell that well because it's not a traditional fighting game, but it definitely seems like Ed Boon, in a similar instance to the previous one, wanted to get this game out, but they just unfortunately couldn't. I also assume that time was a factor here. They were probably working on it, but just needed to focus on another game. So in the end, they couldn't get it out. But similar to the last one, I really do hope this comes out in some form someday, because I think we'd all really, really enjoy it. So everyone, that is 5 unseen products in Mortal Kombat history. I'm sure you guys knew quite a lot of these if you're a big fan of Mortal Kombat, maybe even all of them. But if you did, even if you didn't, I really appreciate you watching to the end of the video. Consider subscribing, as I said at the start. It really, really helps me out, and it lets me know you want to see more Mortal Kombat videos like this. Thank you guys again for watching this far. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks everyone.